Do you feel like you're struggling to speak a second language? You might be finding it hard to speak fluidly, or maybe you just can't come up with the words in the middle of a conversation. Well, this video is for you. I've been teaching English professionally now for about 10 years, and I've helped a lot of students who struggled with their speaking. And on top of that, I've also been studying languages myself, 4 to be exact. So I know how it can be when you just can't say what you want to say. Let's change that in 2025. This video is all about how to supercharge your speaking skills. So this video is in 4 parts. Part 1 is going to talk about how exactly to study from a video. A lot of people get this wrong. They study from videos the same for every single focus that they have, and that's just not the case. You need to study a video differently depending on your goal. So we'll talk about that in part 1. Part 2, I'm going to talk about how to practice your speaking without a partner. It's always best to practice conversation in conversation, but sometimes you need to be able to practice without a partner, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to do just that. In part 3, I'm going to tell you how you can work with a teacher, how to tell them exactly what you want to work on or how you want to work on it to make it most efficient. And then part 4, I'm going to give you my study plan and my teaching plan as well for 2025 for my students who need to improve their speaking. Are you ready? Let's get into it. First, let's talk about how to study from a video. It's not as straightforward as you might think. A lot of us think, oh, I'm just going to throw on a video and just listen to it passively, or I'm just going to run through this video, or I'm just going to break down this video in every single word. Now, all of those different approaches are all valid, but they're not all for the same focus. Depending on what you're trying to improve, you need to choose a particular approach for studying videos. For instance, when you're studying a video for listening skills, you're not trying to get every single detail from the video. You are just trying to get the gist. And for that study, you actually want to go through a lot of videos. Volume is what's your best friend here. When you're studying for speaking, on the other hand, we do milk the video for everything it's got. The way I like to do it with my students is we watch a section and then we go back and break down sentence by sentence to make sure we understand, number 1, what each sentence means, and number 2, what each of the important words actually mean. I love to also break down particular phrases and look at phrases on a whole. For instance, I can't make out what's down the street. You might break it down to make and out, but it doesn't actually mean that. It's an idiomatic phrase, and you have to learn that it's an idiomatic phrase. And breaking those things down that way is very important when it comes to speaking, because that's what you're going to use when you're speaking. You're going to use that idiomatic phrase. And if you understand what it means and how it was used in the context it was used in the video, then you'll actually start to improve. So that's the way you approach studying videos for speaking skills. You break it down for all that it's got. An important thing to note here is you're after quality, not quantity. It will come back and bite you in the butt. I'll explain later about that particular aspect. But you want to go after learning specific words, what they mean in their entirety. Go deep here. Don't try to go wide and collect as many vocabulary as possible, which is a very common thing that people like to do when studying languages. I mean, there's a place and time for that, but for the most part, if you're trying to improve your speaking, go for quality. Understand deeply what words, phrases, and grammar mean, are used for in context, commonality, naturalness. Learn as much as you can about it, and then it'll make it stick more, and then you'll be able to use it more. I also highly recommend making flashcards with these words and phrases. I particularly like to do more phrasal type flashcards, but you can do word flashcards too, whatever floats your boat. But we also just don't want to forget that we actually have to use these words. Don't just get stuck in flashcard mode. Actually use these words, which is a part of part 2 of this video. In this part, I want to talk about how you're going to practice without a partner. Of course, if you can get a partner to practice with, by all means, do that. It's just some of us kind of feel a little bit, uncomfortable asking people to spend their time practicing for us. But if you can do an exchange, great. If you can, pay a teacher, great, which we'll talk about in part 3. But if you just want to practice by yourself, there are ways. So the number 1 way to practice by yourself is to just talk to yourself. Of course, not in public. You maybe talk to yourself in the shower or talk to yourself while you're driving. Practice speaking out loud. Pretend you're talking about a particular subject. You don't have to pretend. Talk about a subject that you like and try to use the words and phrases that you know. Now, sometimes just doing this spontaneously is a little bit hard. So I actually started making an app to help me in this particular area. It's been working really well with my students. I don't know when I'll plan to release it, so don't hold your breath, but I'll just tell you the gist of how the exercise works, and then you can figure out like a way to do it you're on your own. So all you have to do is to randomly shuffle a group of words that you're working on, let's say 5 to 6, but you're going to take each of the words and you give yourself maybe 10 to 15 seconds to make one sentence or a couple of sentences with that word about a story you're going to tell with all the words. And you can change this up however you want. The goal is to be creative and to use the words to kind of prompt you on what kind of story you can tell. You could also use a prompt generator to just like come up with a topic that you have to talk about. That might make it easier to actually come up with a story if you don't feel like you're a creative person. But I found that this actually works with my students who loathe storytelling the most. I have one particular student, he hates storytelling, and every other story writing activity I do with him, he struggles and he ums and ahs and hesitates and he just doesn't know and he's very uncomfortable. But this activity works wonderfully with him, especially on my app that I did it with. So I'm very happy that it's really working well, and he's excited to do it too. He feels the challenge as well, which is really important that you have some sort of challenge when you're doing it, and it works great. So I'm sorry I can't say, an official date for the app that you could be able to use it, but you can kind of figure out a way to do this. But let's move on to part 3, which a lot of us might rely on if we can't find partners or we're too uncomfortable to talk to random people and you just want to find a teacher. So if you want to work with a teacher to improve your speaking in your particular language, like my students do, then this is how I recommend you work with your teacher. So I recommend the particular lesson type that I like to do with my students, which is watching a video of whatever topic that the student is interested in. I have, kids stories for my kids, and I have like Ali Abdaal video for some of my adults. And we go through the video. We watch like a section, just like I said before, you watch a section together, and then we go back and break down each of the sentences, and we break down the words, make sure we understand all the words and understand any like interesting grammar points. And then we make sure to make sentences with all of the words that are important in that section. And then you go back, you put those words in flashcards for the next class. So it's important that you don't do flashcards immediately because it's still fresh in your head. You kind of want to forget a little bit and then do flashcards. I highly recommend Anki. It's free, it's easy to use, easy to set up. I've made a video on this channel about it before if you want to check it out, how to set up your flashcards. I think I even made some resources that you could download. I don't remember quite clearly, but you can check it out. It says something about Anki on it, so you can find it pretty easily. Also, if you want to send this little snippet to your teacher and tell them I want to do classes like this, feel free. You can send this to your teacher and have them design a class like this for you. But for those of you who want to keep it with the self-study and super independent whammons, then I recommend my part 4. Then I'm going to talk about the study schedule that I have planned for 2025. I just want to preface this by saying I work 2 part-time jobs and I go to university. So my schedule is very busy, to say the least. So I worked this out for me so that I can slide it into an already filled schedule. So I also made places that if I think you can expand, if you have more time, maybe you're not as busy as me and you want to spend more time on a particular thing, I'll recommend what to expand on and what to do more of. So first thing we're going to do is study from a video for 20 to 30 minutes a week. I picked 20 minutes, of course, and I'm going to do what I explained before breaking down the video. You'll be surprised. 20 minutes might sound like a lot. It might not sound like a lot to some of you too, but you will get through a lot of content in 20 minutes, or maybe a little content in 20 minutes. It depends on how seriously you go with my advice of going deep. So I like to go to ChatGPT and ask my teacher friends, when do you use this phrase? I do example sentences and I feed it to ChatGPT to check, is this natural? Is this common? Is this formal? Learn as much as you can about the word so that you can know how to use it in your practice. If you have time, like I said, you can do up to 30 minutes. I wouldn't go too much more than that just because of overload on the vocab words, which I mentioned earlier and we'll get to in a second. So maybe you could also do 2 sessions a week. Just beware of the overload of vocabulary words that you'll get from that. Just a precaution. Next activity is speaking practice. You want to actually practice. In fact, Justin Song, one of my favorite learning doctors, he studies learning. He talks about how important practice is compared to just study. When you study, you're getting theory, and it should be 3 to 1 for the average person, 3 to 1 for the amount of practice to study. That means if you study for 1 hour, you should be practicing for 3 hours. So if we're studying for 20 minutes, we should get in an hour of actual practice a week. And then for some of us, it can be even more. It really depends on how good your deep learning processing or your deep processing is. I won't go into detail about that. If you're interested, Google or YouTube Justin Sung. He talks about it all the time. But for our speaking practice part, we're going to try and get 5 minutes of speaking practice. And then if you're going to increase anything, I would increase practice. So if you want to increase your practice, you can kick it up to 10 minutes a day. Now, you can do more, 20, 30, depends on what your practice activity is. I'm going to do 5 minutes of practice a day for 5 days a week. And I say 5, not 6, because for Sunday, I do something a little different, and I'll talk about that when I get to it. But we do 5 minutes, and you can up that to 10 or 20, depending on your schedule. And then for flashcards, of course, we got to get our flashcards in. 5 minutes for flashcards. Honestly, Anki can get really overwhelming if you're not careful. If you put in too many words every week, depending on how many words you collect, by the time you get down to a month's time, you're going to have so many words. You're going to be overwhelmed. 2 months, 3 months, you're not going to be able to keep up with your words after a while. So just take it easy. I do 5 words a week. I know it doesn't sound like much. It adds up, especially if you're learning deeply like I'm recommending you to learn for speaking practice. For speaking, active vocabulary is key. If you don't get it active, there's no point. You're not going to use it in your daily life anyways. So 5 minutes a day, 2 to 3 days a week if you want, depending on your schedule, every day if possible. If you're not a fan of flashcards, obviously keep it to 2 to 3 days a week. The reason I know 2 to 3 days a week works is because of my students. I do flashcards with them. They don't do flashcards on their own. I know they don't. And I'm able to keep up their flashcard pretty steady if we do 5 to maybe 8 minutes each class, and they do 2 classes a week. I just want to say it one more time because it's so important. Remember, if you keep quality over quantity at top of mind, you should be fine with your flashcards and keeping on top of them. Sunday, I take a little bit more time on my flashcard review and my speaking practice because those are fun activities for me. I enjoy my app. It's pretty fun. So I can do more time on it. And then Anki, I can spend a little bit extra time to complete old words. I have some old flashcard lists that I haven't looked at in like over a year. So I'm slowly catching up on those and deleting stuff out. So I've been doing that on a Sunday. So that's my bonus Sunday for you. You can throw that in there if you want. And if you don't want to do anything special, you can just do 6 days out of the week for your speaking and flashcard practice, your regular schedule just for 6 days if you don't want to do anything special for Sunday. I also recommend maybe spending that Sunday just listening somewhat passively to whatever video you're studying. So you're kind of reviewing by listening and seeing how much better your listening is because now you know what most of the words mean. You can do that too. The whole flashcard game is really crazy, and I want to talk more about it as I'm working on my technique and, making it better for my students. So I'll make a separate video about flashcards one day, and we'll talk more in detail about how to do that right. But we are going to do this, loves. I hope that you see the level that you want to see next year in your speaking skills. And if you do want to learn about when I do actually eventually release my app, you can, subscribe to my mailing list. I'll leave a link in the description. I think I'll probably send it to my language teaching people first. So if you're learning English and you want to learn with me on my English teaching channel, you can subscribe to that mailing list and that YouTube channel. I'll leave those links in the description too. But anyways, that's enough for this video. Let's smash our goals in 2025. We got this. This is future Nikki here. Just, I want to apologize for any noise you hear in the background. That's my dad. We love our dad.